Hello, and welcome to the Mothers of All Crime. This is a podcast where we deep dive into mothers involved in infamous crimes and scandals. I'm Monica, and this is Crystal.
Welcome back to the Mothers of All Crime. This week, we're going to be talking about Molly Martens and Jason Corbett and the documentary A Deadly American Marriage. How are we doing, Crystal?
I'm good. How are you?
Very, very well. I'm excited to talk about this documentary and this case.
I am too. I thought the documentary was really good. I think it was a different layout than what we're used to in a lot of these documentaries because they are getting really popular. So it was nice to see producers kind of approach it from a different angle.
Yes, I definitely agree. I felt like it was moving. It was very interesting. You really felt for the people involved, and it felt, I don't know if victim focused is the right way to say it, but it did feel like the person who has passed away, I felt like there was a big feature on them and their family, which was nice and it was interesting.
Yeah, and I think they brought in a good amount of people. Like everyone in the documentary felt relevant. Because I think there have been times we've watched ones before and I'm like, why are they talking to this person? I think on this case, every person that got introduced, from the attorneys to the friends of the couple to the kids, I think it was all very relevant, which was a nice, it didn't feel like there was wasted time.
Yeah, it was all the main players, and it's definitely more interesting to watch when the immediate family is agreeing to be interviewed and agreeing to go on camera, and you're able to get these insights from within the family on both sides. Definitely adds to the complexity of the story.
Yeah. And then on top of it, it kind of turned into like a United States versus Ireland kind of presentation, which
Yes.
was kind of a interesting take on it. And I don't remember this in the media during the time, so I can't really say one way or another, but it felt very dramatic of being like the entire country of basically was against the United States and against this incident. Like it felt very dramatic, but it could have been. I just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like probably for the people involved, it felt that way. And then maybe for the people that were really engaged in this particular case, like following in the media. And I do think it kind of got presented as like Ireland versus America when it really wasn't about that. But
Right.
it did seem that way in some aspects, in a couple different ways. So basically, Jason Corbett was from Ireland. He grew up in Limerick, Ireland, and that's where his family is. And that's where he lived with his first wife, Mags, and they had
Mhm.
two little kids. And then Mags passed away in 2006. And at the time, everyone believed that it was an asthma attack. And I'm not saying it wasn't an asthma attack, but there have been some things called into scrutiny about that.
Which we'll
And
get into.
we'll definitely get into that. I just think it's important to mention that that is sometimes disputed. And so Mark's passed away, and Jason is now a single dad to two small kids, Jack and Sarah, and ends up getting an au pair from America named Molly Martens.
Yeah, and I think it's important to also note that during this time, Americans being au pairs in countries around the world was very trendy. Like I know a bunch of people that kind of in that rough time frame, kind of a couple years later, that's how they spent their summers, like between school or graduated college and didn't really know what they wanted to do. They went and became an au pair. So I don't think it's a crazy thing to be done. And also, from what I understood, they went through an agency. Like it wasn't like he found her on Facebook and was like, "Hey, you want to come live with me?"
Yeah, no, it's a legit thing and it's not uncommon to do. It's basically just having a nanny that lives with you that wants the opportunity to live in another place. And so sometimes people do that, they come from Canada, they want to spend the summer in LA, they want to spend the summer in New York City, something like that, where people have a high demand for au pairs and nannies. And maybe it was just a good solution for a single dad who worked a lot of hours and was very
Mm-hmm.
successful, had the money, didn't have the time. So she basically, moved
Yeah.
in and took over all the household responsibilities.
Yeah, I think in this situation, he really needed that female role in his life because, like you said, he was working a ton of hours, but it kind of also seemed like he had a void, or at least that's how it was presented. Um, from like a quick search, Europeans and au pairs are not abnormal either. It is not a shock, I think, for anyone that he got some help coming in, particularly with his wife passing away. But when I was started the documentary, I was roughly knowing where the story's going. My brain instantly went with, "Of course she was the au pair," like
Mhm.
because soon they started getting closer. They started a romantic relationship, and they ended up getting married. And again, my brain was like, "Of course it was the babysitter. Of course, like of course it was."
It's such a cliche.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a stereotype and it's like one of those things where you kind of roll your eyes, and I'm sure a lot of people in his life did as well. I mean, she's much younger. She
Beautiful.
is beautiful, blonde, tiny, just very different from his first wife and like someone I guess in Ireland should be considered exotic. And
Mm.
I think that, it was very exciting. And also when you see someone in like a mothering role to your kids, it seems like I could see how that would happen.
Oh, 100%. And again, you have someone who is there for you, taking care of you, taking care of your kids. Like it would feel very natural to start to build emotions towards that. And from what was presented, she seemed like a really nice girl, like that it was a fortunate thing that she came in and loved these kids, and the kids really bonded with her, which is what any parent wants with their step parent. You want them to love your kids and your kids to love them. So it at the beginning it seemed like a really nice situation.
Yeah, very convenient because now she'll just live with you and take care of the kids, and I guess you don't even really have to pay her anymore.
Very true.
Yeah. So it's actually a really good deal now if you think about it.
Yeah.
And when we talk about the Ireland versus America thing, it kind of starts here as well because they end up moving to North Carolina in the States to be closer to Molly's family and starting a new life in America with the kids. And so that's like the first real tug against Ireland. And for Molly, she never planned to stay in Ireland forever and it was always going to be a temporary thing. But I think for Jason's family, they were pretty surprised that he was leaving the country.
Yeah, and I think again, it's the anyone who leaves their home country, people are going to be surprised. Like if I all of a sudden up and move to Italy, everyone's going to be like, "Wow, really? Like, are you sure?" Versus if my spouse was from another country, their whole families are like, "Yeah, 100% come back home." So it's really you have that strain on it was going to be there regardless of just what side of the family it was on. But
Hmm.
I think with a lot of it is that her parents were going to be very involved in helping with them and helping with the kids and their family. And financially, your money is going to go farther. They went from a small kind of home in one place to a large, extravagant kind of upper like class lifestyle. Because they, talking to the kids, they were like, they really just were shocked about the size of everything coming over. So it probably was a multitude of things that made that decision happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's where we start to see Molly kind of turn from just the caretaker, someone who they truly loved and wanted, but to becoming mom. Like 100%. Kids are calling her mom. She's introducing them as her children. But I also think that's where we start to see some of Molly's character get cracked. Um, where she's starting to more or less lie to people that, for example, she told someone that she gave birth to Sarah, who is Jason's daughter, with his widow. Molly is clearly not the birth mother. Um, Molly saying she had a sister who passed away that also didn't exist. So when they come back to the United States, we start seeing these cracks of, okay, maybe she's not as perfect as everybody thought she was.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's very bizarre behavior to tell people an entire birth story for a child that you certainly did not give birth to. And I think it shows like her overstepping her boundaries and just completely wanting to take over the family instead of becoming an addition to it. And I think that she wanted to be mommy and she wanted to be the main focus in the kids' lives. And she would bring up a lot that she wanted to adopt them. And it seems like Jason was kind of entertaining that in the beginning. And then he started to make it seem like he wasn't going to have her adopt the kids.
Yeah, which I see both sides of. Like you obviously want to protect your children. And we saw a lot of examples of documentation where he really was trying to protect his kids on, I don't want them to get hurt again, more or less, which is fair.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that that was a thought process for him. But I also see the other side of it is, I'm raising the kid, they already call me mom. I do all the activities, I do the schooling, I do all of that. Why can't I? It's not like they have a step parent, like another mom that they're going to on weekends. Like there is no one else in the picture. So I do kind of see both sides of it at that point.
I mean, I could definitely understand why Molly would want to adopt them and establish rights because as a step parent, she has rights while they're married. But if you were to separate, you would not necessarily be able to retain any rights unless you do a step parent adoption. And then it would protect her in custody situations. And for Jason, I think that he was trying to be pragmatic and realistic about the fact that they may not stay married forever, and if they were to split up, he probably would take the kids back to Ireland. So he wouldn't want to be in a custody battle with someone who's based in the United States. Might make it hard for him to even leave. The kids are
Yeah.
enrolled in school here, they're living in another country, they're established here. So if he shares his rights, then maybe she could make a case that the kids should stay here. And then he's trapped.
Right. And even as a step parent, like you only have as much rights and control as the biological parent allows. So like
Mm-hmm.
if they're in public school as a step parent, you can't just go and collect them without the biological parent's permission. Um so it is interesting that kind of connection. Um and she, I guess, continued to bring it up. Like it wasn't something she brought up once and then it was never talked about again. It was something consistently that she kept trying to do, which again, now you have the question mark of boundaries. You got an answer once, twice, a third time, yet here we are asking again.
Yeah. I think that she just thought that she could just, if she tried hard enough, if she pushed hard enough, she'd be able to get what she wanted.
Yeah. And in her defense, that role has worked for her because Jason would say, I want to slow down this relationship. I want to make sure my kids are okay with everything. Molly would then push, I don't want to wait. I want to keep going, move faster, get engaged, move to the United States, get married.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it seemed like from what they were presenting in the documentary and the timelines that have come out that even though things looked really good and normal from the outside, there was a lot of tension and conflict happening inside the house between Molly and Jason, and that the kids were witnessing a lot of disagreements and harsh words. They show a series of recordings that Molly had been audio recording, filming Jason, and it doesn't make Jason look great, the arguments that they show in the documentary. I mean, it looks like they're having petty, snappy marital disagreements, and he is not kind or nice, and he's pretty demeaning in the recordings, but he also does not know that he's being recorded, and she does. So I think that she's on her very best behavior, and he doesn't know that he needs to be, which obviously gives her an advantage in the videos, which is just, just a thought. But also it speaks to um, a lack of trust that you're recording things in a relationship anyway. Although that is what I would advise someone to do if they were being abused. So I could kind of see both sides of that as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say the context I think is important because,
Mm-hmm.
again, we don't know officially when she started recording it, but from her narrative, she had met with a friend or neighbor or whoever it was who was a family attorney who she had talked to about how the kids and the rights stuff work in the case of a divorce with the abuse. And the recommendation was to start recording things, documenting things so that there would be some kind of support to the abuse claims. And that's kind of what sparked the recordings. And I do think you're right about she obviously knows, so she might be on more best behavior. The thing that I picked up on for it is not necessarily her, it was the kids that were also caught on these tapes because
Mm-hmm.
you had one of the examples, the daughter had done something or reacted something or whatever the case was, and Jason snapped at her, and then it turned into she's just scared, like it's okay. And then even the son was like, yeah, no, she was just scared, like from because he smacked the table real. I'm like, my focus was more the fact that the anger turns, and the whole point that the got brought up in the documentary is they were trying to prove that Jason wasn't this nice, charismatic, family oriented, super great guy that his whole family was presenting him as. And when you are trying to fight that narrative, they're not wrong in saying people who are significant abusers, a lot of the time on the outside, are these super nice, super caring. They present this really perfect, happy life. But behind closed doors, that's not the case. So I think the introduction of those recordings was not only from the court standpoint, but from the documentary standpoint, it shows that not everything is on surface level is always the same when it's just you guys.
Definitely a good point. And I think that you could look at it in multiple ways. Like anybody being judged off their very worst behavior would look pretty bad. But also, I agree that it's pretty significant that he was willing to be so nasty and be so harsh in front of the kids and towards the kids because it wasn't all just directed at Molly. It was also directed at the kids who he, loved so much and wanted to protect so much, but they were also getting caught in the crossfires. And that's not a good situation for anyone. And so I'm of two minds, I suppose, about it. I think that it definitely does not make him look good.
Oh yeah. No, I agree. I back and forth because then like there was a note from a doctor that he reported that he like there was a change in his behavior where he's noticing he's getting angry more for no reason and wanted to like try to
Mhm.
address it. So it was I think this was a change for him. I don't think it necessarily was like he was always super angry all the time, or at least maybe he was trying to maybe he was and he finally was trying to address it. Like we just don't know. Um But I go back and forth too, because we have things that contradict each other a lot throughout this whole thing.
Yeah, that's the common theme, is a lot of contradictory stuff, and it seems like things should be very cut and dry, but they're kind of complex and nuanced, and we see that throughout the case, that even though we know pretty much exactly what happened, we still don't really know what happened.
Even the
And
judge ends up saying that.
exactly, where it's like, this doesn't make sense, and it's like, clearly something happened and we know the order of events, but it's just like, who is truly at fault here is the point. So I mean, this is bringing us up to August 2nd, 2015, which is when this ideal family really shattered and all the illusions came away, and Jason Corbett died a very, very violent, horrible death. um so basically, police were called and Jason was discovered bludgeoned to death. The weapons, plural, were a heavy landscaping brick and a baseball bat. Molly and her father, Thomas, who it happened to be a retired FBI agent, claimed that this was self-defense, that Jason was attacking Molly, strangling her, and that Molly and Thomas beat him to death in retaliation for this. Not in retaliation, to stop him from doing this. And his injuries, his autopsy was consistent with multiple repeated blows by multiple blunt objects. So this was not just, a one strike defense. This was an ongoing, very violent interaction between the three of them.
Yeah. My first thought was, who has a construction brick in their bedroom?
Exactly.
Was my
And the story made
first
no sense. It made no sense. They said that they were going to be painting the bricks, and everybody said that. The kids said that, Molly said that. But even if you were going to paint it and it was going to rain, you wouldn't put it in your bedroom.
Why is it
Like
not in the
this,
kitchen or like the dining room or the plate?
the
Like where the
garage.
activity was going to be.
She said it was going to rain, so they brought it inside. Nobody would put that in their room, something dirty that was in the ground. And this is not a small little tiny place that they live. They live in a big house with a garage, with a deck. There was plenty of places that could have been.
And then, all right, just to play devil's advocate, there are plenty of times that I have walked somewhere, put something down, and then because I got or like went to go
True.
put something in the garage, and then a child is like, "Hey, I need the blah blah blah." And you're like, "Oh, okay," and you just change what you're doing, and you're still holding this stupid brick, and you end up in your bed. Like, but again, my first instinct was, "This is ridiculous. Why is it here?" But then the other part of me is like, "Well, mom brain, or parent brain, or even nanny brain. Like, if you're distracted, all of a sudden, I'm putting my phone in the like refrigerator, and I don't know where it is."
Right.
Like.
I mean, definitely true. Although you would think a brick would be like a big, heavy,
I know, and that's why
conspicuous object.
it's a terrible defense, but felt to mention.
Yeah, no, it is possible, and it is and people do weird stuff, and people do stuff that is gross and that defies logic. So it's not like it's impossible that she did put the brick in her room, either by accident or by intention. It is possible. It just doesn't seem
It's just
like the
weird.
most likely explanation for why the brick
Yeah.
is there. But also, there maybe would have been other things they could have used other than a brick if they were premeditating this.
Correct. And I also think it's important to note here that the scene, when being reviewed, it was gory to the point of horrifying.
Oh my
The
gosh.
attorneys had a hard time talking about this actual crime scene when they were doing interviews on it, and it takes a lot to get those attorneys who have seen some of the worst things that happen not wanting to talk about things. And even the pictures that they showed on the documentary and that are available online, it there's just blood everywhere. It's a disaster. Multiple rooms in the house. And that's where they start to kind of start piecing together the order of events, because you have the blood spatter, you have the trails. It's just now figuring out the order that it happened.
Right, which is very significant here. And the crime scenes were absolutely ghastly, terrible. There was just bloody handprints everywhere. And bizarrely, Molly and Thomas were not very injured at all. They had like little scrapes and bruises, but it was extremely minimal. They didn't have any serious injuries. And Jason was a gory mess, which is just, it's interesting based on what they said happened.
Yeah. So when Molly sat down with police, her narrative, more or less, was that her and her husband got in a fight, which was not unusual.
Mhm.
The daughter had a nightmare and got up in the middle of the night. He got mad and then started choking Molly. At which point she grabbed the brick from the nightstand and hit him on the head and shoulder. However, we also need to keep in mind her dad was with them. I don't know if they were officially living there, mom and dad, or if they were
No.
visiting. They were visiting, right?
They were visiting, and that becomes important later because, well, I guess it's important at this point too. So they lived about 4 hours away, and they weren't planning like 2 weeks before, a week before, or whatever to come there. They actually had other plans that they canceled and said that they just decided to go stay at Molly's for the day because it was like such beautiful weather. Like one of the interviews the dad is doing throughout the documentary. So they kind of last minute decided to go and stay over.
Yeah, and then again simultaneously being interviewed by PD, his name is Tom. Claims that Molly yelled for help. He heard them fighting and he intervened with a baseball bat and struck Jason.
Mm-hmm.
And what I thought was wild is during this like when Sharon, Molly's mom, was interviewed, her statement was that she woke up from her daughter's scream, her husband went to go check it out, and then she just rolled over and went back to sleep.
Yeah, I didn't find that believable either. You're not a little
Sure you
curious?
did. Not even that you're
Yeah.
curious, but like,
You're not worried?
yeah, like your daughter is screaming, and in theory, if we go with Molly's version, you know that there's a history of abuse happening in this relationship. A, you're not going to do anything. B, now that we know how gory, horrific, intense this argument becomes slash the death of Jason, that's not a quiet situation that just happens. You just sleep through that whole thing. You don't go
I
get the kids and be like, hey, let's go like on and up. Like, you just go back to sleep. I can't.
y- it it's not believable. It's not believable at all because if you really heard someone being bludgeoned to death with a bat and a brick, I mean, that would be extremely loud and terrifying. And you would think that she would be calling the police and trying to get herself, the kids, out of the house,
Right.
especially since she fancied herself a grandmother to the kids because they'd fully taken on grandparent roles. So if you're so worried that your daughter has this awful husband and you're so worried about the kids, I mean, there's no way that you would just roll back and go back to sleep. And even if you did, you would wake up again.
Right. And that, yeah, again, like if say you're like, all right, cool, honey, go deal with that because you're a man, you're gonna go talk to the man, whatever. Roll back over, go to sleep. Fine. That part I can get on board with. I don't necessarily agree, but I can get on board. It's the part where she just continued to sleep is really what gets me. Like, there's just no way. But anyway, Tom continues to do his interview. And he's claiming that when he entered the room, Jason had Molly by the throat, saying, "I'm going to kill her, let her go." There's a back and forth. Jason tried to grab the bat, and then he started hitting him. And again, but one thing, he is doing this interview and he's extremely calm, extremely composed. Molly's kind of crying, very disheveled, like very shocked. Like her reaction during the interview that I watched, I did believe. Like she definitely seemed like she was in some kind of distress, shock, a little bit of like a horror feeling. But then I got to remind myself, Tom was retired FBI. He had a history with the counterintelligence department and the criminal department. And we have no idea what he saw in his career. So if you're working on cases that have a lot of gory, horrific things, like he might, you get a desensitization to a point, but also with how long he was in it, he has been trained in how deception works, how manipulation works, how interrogations work, how questioning a victim works. So, keeping in the back of our head, he has all this extensive training on how to communicate with police and what words they're looking for and how ended questions work and body language and all the things that they're looking at while they're talking to a victim that when you're in shock, you don't always control. So I thought the difference there was very significant.
Yeah. I mean, he can remain calm under pressure, and that makes sense with the career that he had. And it makes sense that Molly is not as calm. And that to me is pretty believable that she would be pretty shocked and horrified, regardless of her intentions or anything like that. It would have been extremely traumatic, I would imagine.
Oh, 100%.
Just
Like, just
even
think of like the normal person, right? Like, if, I don't know, someone's bleeding everywhere in front of our group of friends, you probably would be very calm under the situation. Be like, all right, let's respond this way. Versus we have other friends that would probably lose their mind. If someone barged into a home in an aggressive way, I'm probably going to be a little bit more calm than other people that we know who may,
yeah.
like, it just, you got to think of like the training that you have as an individual, but also flight, fight, fear, and freeze. Like, you also have those instinctual responses on how you respond to things.
Absolutely. Definitely. So I thought they were pretty compelling in their interviews. But the real interviews, I guess, that mattered were the interviews with the kids. That became kind of a critical point in this case. And initially, the kids were saying that their father, Jason, was really mean and abusive. And they gave pretty compelling stories in Molly's defense. And then the children pretty much turned completely on those stories and said that they never witnessed any abuse and that they were actually asleep during the attack on the night that their father passed away and don't know what happened. So that testimony, the early interviews did not match the later interviews that were actually not used in court.
Yeah, the fact that none of those testimonies got to court, I did think was kind of odd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. None of the early interviews made it into court the first go around.
One thing I do want to point out is the way the kids were interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
So child advocacy facilities, and there are, in my opinion, just not enough of them. This is something that I personally feel very strongly there should be so many of them. because the people in these advocacies are specifically trained to talk to children about trauma and do interviews that are less traumatic for them, but also at an age appropriate level. Because when you have a police officer, for example, who talks to a grown adult, they're going to be able to grasp the full picture of the situation. Kids don't understand a lot of it. And also, they can't always recognize when thoughts are not their own thoughts. But kids are also very truthful for the most part. And when you're talking to a kid, you ask questions kind of more around if they make a statement of with this example. So, daddy hit mommy 1 or 2 times and physically and verbally abused her. Okay, so who told you that? Who told you? How do you know that? Well, mom told me. And then you're looking at verbs, right? Verbiage, right? Like most 5-year-olds aren't going to sit there and tell you that they were verbally assaulted by their parent. They're going to say, well, mommy was mean to me. And they're looking for clues here during these interviews that, okay, are these the kids' words? Is it coaching? And when we watch some of the interviews, the son, for example, mentioned the nightmare that his sister had, which he wouldn't have known if someone hadn't told him. This is not his memory. And
Right.
that's where they start trying to navigate it. And again, I think these programs are so important because it helps police understand if there's coaching, if there's something happening, but also it's less traumatic for these kids. Like they're controlled environments. They're got a lot of things and trainings, and also most of them have additional supports. So the one local to me does these forensic interviews, but also will offer therapy for the kids afterwards. If they have a therapy dog, they're like, hey, let's process some of the stuff we just talked about afterwards. They do their best to get from every angle to help trauma. And I don't think our justice system does a good job of dealing with the trauma that sometimes an investigation can cause. They're like, we did our investigation, you're
Yeah.
on your own, okay, bye. So I'm glad that the original interview was with a program like this, and I would personally be very curious if they followed up with the resources. But again, the kids moved back to Ireland, so I never got the opportunity to, if there were resources.
That's true. Because almost right away, Molly's asking about if the kids are going to be staying with her and when she leaves, because she wasn't immediately arrested. She was, still thinking that she was going to be retaining custody of the kids. And I mean, that is not what ended up happening. And they ended up going to live with Jason's sister in Ireland and her family. And Molly basically, I mean, she never really saw them again except for in court. So, yeah. So
I will
she went from being there.
say it was kind of odd to me that in the will, the children were left to be raised by his sister and not his wife. I
Mhm.
did find that odd.
Yeah.
Grand scheme of things, probably for the best, but it is an odd circumstance where for one of your kids, this is the only mother that they know because they were too young to remember their birth mother. And now you're going to move them to somewhere. You know what I mean? It felt a little odd to me.
I think that was just another example of Jason already having one foot out the door. I mean, he was talking to lawyers, he was figuring out divorce stuff, he was not allowing her to adopt the kids. He didn't want her to have them, didn't want her to have any rights to them.
But even from the beginning, at no point were the kids ever left to her.
I don't know why he married her, but I don't think he really trusted her to raise the kids full time. Not beyond her capacity as a nanny, basically. Like, he was like, you can watch them while I'm here, but you're not good enough to have them on your own. I want them to be with my real family, basically. I don't think he was that
Which,
committed.
yeah, and I see that. But from like the kids' perspective, at this point, now they've lost 3 parents. Like now they're
Yeah.
starting over again with these new people that obviously they knew who they were, but moving and living with someone and knowing and seeing them on a holiday are 2 very different things.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, it seems like they integrated great and they became another family, even to the point of kind of referring to them as mom and dad, um, which is really good to hear. But it takes time, right? Like it's a hard transition to not only have to process the gravity of the situation, but also, all right, well now I have a whole new family and a whole new life. Like the poor things.
I know. They really did not have a lot of stability at all. And I'm so glad that they have like an aunt and uncle that are so committed to them now. And they do seem really great. And the family seems very established and settled. And I'm sure it's been a positive experience for the kids to be around their dad's family, because no matter what he was really like, I think for the kids, it's important for them to remember him as being great. And maybe he was great. I'm not saying that he wasn't, but I'm just saying that to be convinced at some point that your father was so awful and to have so many allegations about him, and then to be with people that are very firmly on the your dad was awesome side of things, is probably pretty healing.
Yeah. I think, and this is my personal opinion, I think neither parent was a superstar. I think Molly and Jason both had their issues, just in different kind of issues.
Yeah.
Um, I think Molly, there's a lot of evidence of maybe some mental health stuff, some self-harming, obviously a lot of manipulation from the lies and things that we've seen. There's a lot more that we didn't mention, but it it's interesting. I think they kind of had a raw deal in general.
Yeah.
um, but and I agree that I think the family that they moved into definitely had really great presenting. However, there are question marks there because the kids did end up taking back their statements and saying that Molly told them to lie because if they didn't, then they were going to get taken away and never see her. And there is accusations that the aunt is the one that started putting that into their head, that Molly told them that, and that wasn't really what happened, and blah blah blah. We're never gonna know, to be honest. We'll never know. But it is an interesting kind of sprinkle of information that they did retract their statements, but in a very different environment over a Zoom call. It's interesting.
Yeah, I do think it would have been better if they were interviewed in person as opposed to a Zoom call, because you just can't control their environment the same way in a Zoom, and you don't know what's happening on the other, like on the periphery of that call. But I think it comes down to, who do you think coached the kids? Because in some sense they were coached regardless. And it was either that they were being coached by Molly or they were being coached by their relatives in Ireland, because you can't have a situation where nobody was doing it, because their story did change significantly. So it's like, were you lying then? Are you lying now? And for little kids, like, I don't blame them for any of this, and I think it's totally understandable that they were confused, and all the adults around them gave them new perspectives and shaped their narrative,
Oh
and
yeah.
whether they did it on purpose or not, I I could see a world where unintentionally they were very, very
Yes.
manipulated,
Yes.
and
I
also
think
maybe intentionally.
yeah, I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle of both stories.
Yeah. And the family in Ireland, they don't really know what was going on like that month and like 2 months before. They know what was going on prior, and they know what they think Jason was capable of and what Molly was capable of and what kind of people that they were. But like we said before, you don't really know who people are behind closed doors. And when you live far away from family, it can be even easier to hide certain things.
Exactly. So they did go to court. Spoiler. And again, the kids' testimonies didn't get put in. And they were found guilty, which frankly didn't really surprise me.
Me either. I did think they kind of got a decently length sentence, though. I mean, it was second-degree murder, which I guess it's an appropriate sentence for that, but I just sometimes with a self-defense claim, people get a lot less time. But they were sentenced to 20 to 25 years. And Molly's father is old at the time. So that's very significant, especially for someone who is late middle-aged.
Mm-hmm. He would spend the rest of his life in jail. Yeah, 100%. And I think one factor that kind of came into play here is, let's take the narrative that Jason did attack her. They were defending her to save her life, right? In the state of North Carolina, the minute that the threat is no longer imminent, you are supposed to stop the violence. And it is very apparent that that did not happen. The threat was no longer imminent and the violence continued. There also was evidence that at some point the door was closed and there was extreme violence happening before Tom got there. So again, we're never going to truly know what happened in every aspect of it, but the charge of what they got does not surprise me. I go back and forth on the length. I go back and forth on that one for the original.
Yeah, that makes sense. Pretty much right away, Molly and Thomas both appealed this sentence. They were pretty shocked and horrified that they were convicted in the first place. And they ended up getting their convictions overturned, which was absolutely devastating to the kids in Ireland. They were so upset at the news that Molly and Thomas were going to be released. They thought that cold-blooded murderers were out walking around, and so that was extremely difficult for them. And they were hell-bent on testifying at the next trial and really wanted them to get the book thrown at them and to get very serious prison time again. And instead, they ended up taking a pretty controversial plea deal, and they both pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter and got a lot shorter of sentences. I have those written down somewhere.
Yeah, I think it was 51 to 74 months plus time served. They served about 3.5 years. So that's about 7 or 8 months plus or minus good behavior that they would have to go back to jail for.
51 to 74 months, yes. And then, so they basically served 7 more months and then they were out and free.
Yeah, and I think when it came to the plea deal, again, at this point though, there was evidence that the attorneys were bringing in that when you put people on the stand and you have a jury, you never know what way a direction a jury is going to go. At least with a plea deal, the judge is making the determination, not a group of people. And the attorneys had brought in the original conversation interview with the kids. The attorneys had brought into question of his first wife's death, which we had bringing it full circle. We talked about accusations. Oh goodness, that he may have been the cause of his first wife's death by strangulation and not an asthma attack. And we had evidence that was going to be presented on. There was a mark on her neck that's consistent with strangulation, urination, in her pajamas, also consistent with losing consciousness from strangulation. So there was a lot of things that they couldn't control in this new trial.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from a prosecutor standpoint, you'd rather get something and have a judge determine that than the chance of these two people going to trial and then walking out scot-free.
Yeah, because it's still technically a win. They still pled guilty. And so even though they are out of prison now, they are still guilty. They are still convicted felons. And I guess that's still considered to be some type of justice. I mean, certainly for the Irish family and the Irish community in general, they saw this as a major miscarriage of justice, and that the contention of that family is that the whole thing was staged, basically, and that Jason was killed in his sleep, and that there was no self-defense involved. And then obviously the Martens claim that this was self-defense. And for the Corbetts, they don't really feel like Mag's death is relevant because it was just a tragic asthma attack. And of course, on the other side, they're saying that, oh, well, it's quite a coincidence how this happened. And I'm not really sure what to think. I did find it actually pretty compelling when Thomas Martin was saying that Mags's father had said that he held Jason responsible for Mag's death. And then later on in the documentary, we see tons of evidence saying he never said that, and that he actually put out a statement himself saying, I didn't say that, and I don't feel that way. So it just felt like, is Molly the only one that lies here, or does Thomas also lie? And was this...
Well, his dad, he's also passed away, so we can't. Do we know when that statement was put out? Because I was under the impression that he just wrote it and that's what they just had it, not that it was like a public.
So
thing.
it wasn't... I actually don't know. I don't know.
You know what I mean? Like it'd be like he also has passed away. There's no one. We can't ask him what he thinks. We're going off of the family saying this quote statement that he had. I don't know when he passed away.
This said that her father went to a solicitor, a lawyer, and said that... I'm pretty sure there was a written statement from the father saying that he did not say that, but I don't know when it was.
I don't know. I'll have to look.
Well, it's clearly a disputed thing.
Yes, regardless.
So this says that after Jason's murder, the dad of the first wife went to a solicitor in Ireland to state officially that his former son-in-law had absolutely nothing to do with the tragic death of Mags. So, I mean,
but just randomly, like again, consistently in this, things just aren't adding up because the retrial that happened almost 4 years later when they brought that information up.
I wonder if perhaps because there was interviews earlier on with Thomas where he was bringing that up, and I wonder if that information had gotten to the family in Ireland, and that's why he made that statement.
That could be it.
Yeah, that's what I think. But regardless, there's a lot of disputes, right, about what actually happened, what actually we think. And another problem is Mag's autopsy can be apparently interpreted multiple ways, and it is not super clear what her cause of death is just from that autopsy alone. And it's possible that she had some sort of cardiac event. It's possible that she had an asthma attack. It's possible that there was some other cause of death, and none of them are conclusive. So,
yeah,
we won't really know, unfortunately. But I think that to really talk about what we think happened, it's like we have to kind of suspend some of our think. Like, if Mags, let's say, for I don't know, but if she had been murdered by Jason, does that change what we think happened with Molly and Thomas? Well, I guess actually maybe I should ask you, what do you think happened?
I think that's a loaded question.
I know. And we will mention once again, the judge at the end said we basically will never know what happened. So there's really no wrong answer.
Yeah, I think they were both toxic, to be honest. I think
Mm-hmm.
both of them presented outly that they were like sparkly happy people, but I think at over time Molly just wasn't able to hide it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because like one thing that reason to support that is there was this like peacock code word that the kids had with grandma, and like she hid their phone number around the house. If it was just Jason, why are you hiding it? I think it was both of them that there were issues with. And the word
Ooh.
peacock wasn't told to Molly, it was told to just the kids. So I think there was toxicity on both sides, and I don't know what happened behind it. I think the violence was extreme 100% and overkill and unnecessary. But I could see how it started mutual and then took a turn. But I don't know. If you ask me again, I'd probably change my answer. What do you think?
So I've also changed my mind a couple times throughout this. But at the moment, I'm kind of between two theories. The first theory is that Molly staged this and that she picked a fight with Jason when she knew her dad was there, and had been gassing her dad up for weeks, saying that, oh, Jason's so terrible and he's going to take the kids from me and he hits me and he does all of these things, which maybe is true, maybe is not true. I don't know. But I think that she planned to have a conflict with him that night and jumped it up a bunch of notches, hoping that her dad would get involved and kill him in her defense. But I actually don't think that's the most likely. I think the most likely is that they wanted to make it look like it was self-defense or that it was defense, and that they did kill him while he was sleeping, because the extent of his injuries and like the way that Sharon has described what's going on, where she's just, she just hears one scream. If someone was being bludgeoned to death during a fight, it would be so loud and so crazy. There's no way the kids would sleep through that. And I think Jack would have a memory of what was going on. But if they started attacking him while he's laying in bed and they get some good head injuries right off the bat, it's not going to be that loud. There was also trace amounts of sedatives found in his bloodstream, and it could have been that he was slightly sedated, which also helped and also gave them the upper hand. And I think it's pretty suspicious that they were just, happening to visit that day out of the blue. So I think that's what I think happened.
Yeah, I think there's so many versions of it. I think to support one of your theories, like Molly's ex-fiance did publish a book before Jason died. Put that out there. And his whole thing was talking about their terminal relationship and trauma from Molly and how she was like a pathological liar, basically. And he even talked to the detectives during the investigation, and they told him that he wasn't needed because they had enough evidence. Um, and I think that's an interesting kind of addition to kind of support your theory that she could be a lot smarter than people give her credit for, and that could have been planned if she like they throw around a lot of clinical terminologies, which we've established in my opinion get used too often and not
Mm-hmm.
correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But it if some of his accusations are true and some of the people who support him are true, it would explain the plan that if that is the case.
Yeah. No, definitely.
But yeah, I don't know. I think if we asked me in another couple days, I probably would have a different opinion. So I'm on board with the we'll never know the answer.
Yeah. I think that's it, because I agree. I feel like at some points during this, I really thought that Molly was a victim in the situation. So I think that I also I could see it from multiple perspectives. I think right now, though, that's my theory. But
Yeah,
we'll
I
never know.
think yeah, exactly. And I think it depending if more evidence comes out or more kids in another couple years could be like, I'm living on my own. I did reflection and therapy and I actually lied again. Like we just time will tell. Time will tell. I do think the only victims truly are the kids. In my opinion. I think even Molly, if she was a quote victim, I think she was also abusive and manipulative in certain ways. So I use the word victim loosely, but
Yeah. I don't really know who the victim was in the situation. I think the kids, Jack and Sarah, who
yep, the
were
kiddos.
really brave and really incredible. And I did love their aunt and uncle. Especially loved when the uncle was in the car and he was he was telling them to, keep their heads up and their shoulders straight and fuck those people. I was like,
Yeah,
he's great.
aunt rubs me the wrong way every once in a while, but
Hmm.
uncle, I am on board. Like every time he talked, I'm like, yeah. Like
Yeah, I really liked him a lot.
I agree. She depending what she talked about rubbed me the wrong way, which is why I could see the accusations of coaching. That's the only reason
Yeah.
I don't know. I think she's great and she's really taking care of those kids and she's done an amazing job stepping into that role. But I like him more.
I like him more too. I do see why she would obviously want to be defending her brother,
Oh, 100%.
and um I could see how that would really color the way that you act and your perspective on everything, because I don't think that she intentionally manipulates the kids at all. I think
Yeah.
maybe she's unintentionally manipulated
Yeah.
them,
Mm-hmm.
but from her perspective, she's not manipulating them. And I think that maybe the uncle, because he is an in-law to Jason, I think maybe he can see things a little bit more clearly. There's a little bit more nuance. I still think that he thinks that, Jason was the victim and Thomas and Molly are evil, evil people, which I go back and forth on. But I think that he has just a little bit more distance from it than Tracy does.
Yeah. Well, all right. So that was all I think that we had. Is there any final thoughts that you have?
I don't think so. I feel like we touched on everything I wanted to touch on. I really enjoyed the documentary and I found it to be a really interesting case. Thought the kids were super compelling. How about you? Anything final?
No, I would recommend people to watch the documentary. I think they did a really great job.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that the kiddos are starting to try to accept that none of this was their fault and move on and build a life for themselves. So I really hope the best for both of them.
Yeah, I did feel so bad for them when I felt just blaming themselves um, for them being released. Like that's so much, that's such a burden to have on their shoulders, which it's very unfair.
Yeah.
It's not their fault at all. Obviously, they're truly the only victims in this case.
Yeah. Well, that's everything we have for this week. And I look forward to next week talking about our next mother.
Yeah, me too. I'll see you then.
Till next time.
Bye.